Are you ready for a show that talks sports from the fans' point of view?
We've seen Michael Jordan score 37 points a game in his era. How many could he score in today's NBA?
There's not a player out there who I'd rather have than LeBron James.
Are you ready for a show that isn't afraid to challenge anyone when it comes to sports? If Adam Silver really wanted to fix tanking in the NBA, he would stop rewarding teams by giving them the best chance to win the draft lottery.
I mean, how many times will Roger Goodell drop the ball on handling domestic violence in the NFL?
Look, athletes have every right to talk politics, but if the fans stop tuning in, that's their right.
Then you're ready for Talk Back, a podcast where two fans debate the media narrative and discuss the world of sports as we see it.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome to a special holiday edition of Talk Back. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Nesbit, and with me is Justin Gay. We are just getting through the holidays. It's going to be a shortened episode once again, just as we did last week for episode 229. Here we are between Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa. There's lots going on until the new year, but Justin, a lot to talk about in the world of sports as well. So with the NFL coming to week 17 and even some news out of Los Angeles in the NBA, we couldn't let that slide, especially I know you're looking forward to talking about my boy, LeBron James. But before we get to that in segment one, and it's going to be our only segment again this week, a one-segment show for you guys, I got to ask you, Justin, how was the holidays? It was a little busy around here, and I know you've had a lot going on with the new house and everything you've got going on with building that, but you spent Christmas in your brand new house with your family. How'd it go?
It was great. It was nice to be here. Finally feels like home now. Both kids were sick, and we ended up at urgent care on Christmas Day, so that's never a good thing, but we had a great day together, time with family, so it was a good day all together, and Santa came and made the kids happy. So,
well, I'm glad to hear that. I got to see your pictures on Instagram of your house and your family. It looks like you had a great time. Your house is gorgeous. Really glad that all worked out for you. I got to tell you, I always thought it was funny, these car commercials where people were having the car out in the driveway with a big red bow on it. The husband or the wife gives it to their spouse or significant other. And I've always thought for 20-some years, I mean, who really does that? And then this year, Justin, I did that. I bought my wife a brand new 2019 Honda Odyssey Touring Elite for Christmas. And yes, I did the whole bow on the hood thing for her. So I'm now one of those people that I thought for 25 years, who does that?
I thought you were going to say maybe you bought like two of them and like that commercial where she picks the color that you actually want. But it seems like it worked out at least better for you. That poor guy ended up getting the color he didn't want.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. She liked the white one, and we've had gray vehicles for, decades it seems like. We've had gray Jettas. We've had, her past minivan was gray. My Ford Expedition was gray before the car that I have now. Now I have a black car, a little sedan, and she has a white minivan. So in our garage right now are two brand new vehicles, but it's like yin and yang, not only from the black and the white, but they could not be more different with her minivan and my little BMW sports car. Kind of funny along those lines, but I always just laughed at those people and I just became one. So it was kind of a crazy holiday around here as well. Lots to go on in the new year, and we're just happy to get together and talk sports once a week. And that's the nature of this show, is just to sit across the room, sit across the table, or even sometimes in our own studios, as we are this week, and just talk a little bit of sports. So, Justin, I know you've got us all teed up and ready to go with, week 16 in the NFL. It did not disappoint, as it usually doesn't, because we're getting to that playoff push. The Steelers, what a mess. It's just coming and going. You never know what you're going to get from them. And now we're starting to wonder, is Mike Tomlin even safe going into next year? Because the other team we're going to talk about out of that AFC North division is the Baltimore Ravens. They have now taken control, and they control their own destiny. I know you've got some questions about them, but specifically Lamar Jackson, is he the right guy to lead them to this next stretch? And then that tough game this week against the Browns. We'll want to discuss that a little bit. A couple of teams seem to have things wrapped up. A couple of teams may not want to show their full hand, like the Minnesota Vikings and Chicago Bears. How's that all going to play out? And then we've got to shift gears at the end of the show. And that's right, I teased it a minute ago. We got to talk about LeBron James. He's been in the news maybe a little bit too often in the past week and a half to 2 weeks. Even for guys like me who are huge fans of LeBron James, there are some things that we'd rather not read about when we open up ESPN.com and FoxSports.com. So we'll have all of that and more on episode 230 of Talk Back.
We are back here on episode 230. This will be a one-segment show again this week, trying to do some shorter shows since a lot of our listeners may actually not be working, not be on the road as much. So we wanted to give you guys some shorter episodes for those short car rides to do some shopping or returns or maybe get that post-holiday workout in. So let's jump right into the NFL Week 16 action. The big game on Sunday was the Pittsburgh Steelers at the New Orleans Saints. And for a while, Eric, in this game, it looked like Pittsburgh really controlled this game throughout. New Orleans climbed back into it. This was a 28-24 game with about 4 minutes and 11 seconds left on the clock. Pittsburgh had a 4th and 5, and they decided to pull the fake punt. They came up about a yard short, and of course, Drew Brees capitalized right there, went down, got the Saints a touchdown. Steelers were driving late in this game. Juju Smith-Schuster fumbles, and the Steelers, as we talked about 2 weeks ago on this show, are on the outside looking in at the AFC playoff picture, and they are going to need a lot of help, especially from the Cleveland Browns, if they're even going to have a shot to get into playoffs. So I got to ask you, Eric, that 4th and 5 call, did Mike Tomlin cost the Steelers a chance at the playoffs this year?
It's another one of those 4th and some yardage to go calls that we've talked about all year long. I thought it was an odd call in that position. I felt like there was still at least enough time on the clock to maybe think about doing something. But I think it's just kind of what we've seen from the Steelers for the past couple of weeks. You just get this sense, and I'm not even looking at stats right now. I don't even have my notes open to the pages where we're looking at box scores and we're looking at the lines and the overall stats from each guy. It doesn't really matter. When we're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers over the last month to month and a half, I think we're really carrying on that theme of what emotion we're in Pittsburgh when we're taking the field. And I just think that from coaching on down, I'm very concerned about this team and about their future, because when push comes to shove, some of these tough games, I feel like there's too many mistakes being made. Justin, you picked out a good one there, but let's talk about that whole fourth quarter. You have Stevan Ridley, who has been a fumble machine throughout his career, even in New England and other places where he just can't hold on to the ball. Now he comes in, he starts the fourth quarter with a fumble. Then you've got this fake punt situation, and then the game ends with a guy who really did a nice move for fantasy players, took the field, tried to gain some fantasy points in Juju Smith-Schuster. He's been a great player all year, top 5 receiver in the league in terms of yardage. But what's he do? He ends the game with a fumble. What a mess of a fourth quarter. And I just think it goes to the bigger picture in Pittsburgh that whether or not that fake punt situation was the right call or not, but it speaks to the overall emotion of where Pittsburgh's at in their feeling of their season and in their feeling overall of where their franchise is headed, Justin, because I just feel like it's a mess and it just speaks volumes of the organization as a whole right now.
It felt just like, again, we've talked about it before, it felt like a panic move at that point. It felt like the same move Georgia made in the SEC title game where they had a 4th and 11 and went for it. At least this was 4th and 5. But the Saints had only scored 24 points. Up until that point, late in the fourth quarter, it wasn't like this was that 54-51 game we saw Monday Night Football between the Rams and Chiefs where no one could stop each other. The Steelers had series where their defensive line just absolutely dominated the Saints. So you got to feel at that point, if you can punt the ball and pin them even inside the 20 and make Brees go the length of the field to get a touchdown because you were up 4, he needed a touchdown, you're going to put a lot more pressure on him than if you do that move and it fails. I just didn't like the call at that point. We've talked about it. I liked the Chargers move a few weeks ago on that Thursday night in Kansas City because they were playing with house money. The Steelers were just in a completely different situation because they had to win this football game once the Ravens, who we're going to talk about next, went in Saturday night and did what they did to the Chargers. We talked about the fact that if the Steelers lost 2 or the Ravens found a way to run the table, the Steelers were in big trouble. And you saw a team that played really well. And defensively, they weren't out of that game at all. They were up 4 points. I just don't see why at that point you don't put a little bit more trust in your defense versus giving Breeze a short field at home. You swing the entire momentum of that game. It just felt like a panic move. And it gets back to your point about this team being such a mess. They're depending on a guy like Stephen Ridley late in this game, a guy who's had some fumbling issues in the past. So, Eric, let me ask you, we've sort of been on the side of don't bring Le'Veon Bell into this locker room, but you saw a team that's kind of fallen apart in second halves. They had to fall apart against the LA Chargers at home. They went into Oakland, didn't play very well. They had an opportunity here where it felt like if they had Le'Veon Bell, maybe he doesn't cough that football up. Did them not having Le'Veon Bell cost them more than, do you think, than Tomlin has?
Nah, I don't think so, because I think you look at the fact that until Connor was injured, he really played a very serviceable role for them all season long. Then he goes down with injury, but you get certain contributions that are helpful from another couple of guys. And even those guys weren't the ones that caused this. It was Stephen Ridley, who, you're talking third, fourth string guy at that point. He's bounced around a little bit. So I just can't really throw that all on the shoulders of the running backs outside of the fact that they've had a couple of guys get dinged up here. But Le'Veon Bell, maybe does he make that fumble? It's hard to say. He's made mistakes like that. But this team, Big Ben threw for, I think, 380 yards, 3 touchdowns.
Yep.
Antonio Brown was a monster. Juju Smith was having a decent game. Like I said before, he's had a great season. I don't feel like this offense is really sputtering without Le'Veon Bell. I think they get in some spots that are uncomfortable when they don't have a veteran in the backfield. But again, had James Conner never gone down, he would have been great all season long and filled that role. So I still put this on leadership. I still put this on the fate of the organization and the uncertainty that I know they're kind of saying Mike Tomlin's probably safe and that kind of thing, but I don't know that he really is. And I just think it's what you said. It's a panic move. And you look at these fumbles, and it's discipline, and it's these things that I just don't know if it's not time for is it time for a house cleaning in Pittsburgh?
I think definitely they need a locker room or culture change there. It feels like that's sort of gotten out of control. And you think back to some of the dumb penalties that they've had, thinking back at that Chargers game where you've got a team that has been notorious over the last 2 or 3 seasons for just missing field goals and missing extra points and having all kinds of issues in the kicking game. And you jump off sides 3 different times and you just keep giving him opportunities to build his confidence in one of the tougher stadiums to even kick field goals at. So it just feels like this team, Eric, there's a lot of undiscipline on there. I think the Connor injury definitely hurt them because they are depending on third, fourth string guys at this point. But we have seen other teams that have been able to benefit from injuries. That would be a team like the Baltimore Ravens that looked pretty good early, and then they hit a midseason slump, and then Joe Flacco gets hurt, and they turn it over to Lamar Jackson, who definitely benefited from the fact that the Ravens didn't really play anybody that tough in his first few starts. But he went into Kansas City. He played a tough game there. They got beat in overtime. And Eric, a game that we thought that would be a notch in the loss column for the Ravens and would be that game the Steelers really could depend on as a loss for the Ravens, turned out to be the opposite as Baltimore went into Los Angeles and really put it on the Chargers in that game defensively. They looked great. They made the Chargers offense look extremely pedestrian in that football game, just felt like they couldn't get anything going. And now all of a sudden the Ravens not only get themselves out of the traffic jam for the 6th seed in the AFC, they now control their own destiny to win the AFC North and have a home playoff game on Wild Card Weekend. So, Eric, when you watch this team, one thing we've talked about even offline is it sort of reminds us of the Broncos with Tebow, where you have this sort of unorthodox offense with a running quarterback who's not really the threat to throw the ball all over the field, but you have a very dominant defense that's playing with a ton of confidence. So as this Ravens team now looks like, again, they control their own destiny, they win Sunday, and they get that wild card game at home. So do you feel like this Ravens team is a threat to make a run in the playoffs with that sort of run game and defensive mantra that they have? Or will Lamar's limitations finally catch up to them when they start playing top talent on the road in the AFC?
It's a great question. I'll tell you why. Before I answer it, I want to talk about the fact that we've touched on this over the past couple of weeks. What's confusing about the NFL is that when any one of these teams over the past few weeks has had an opportunity to set themselves apart and take control of either their division or their position in their playoff standings, they haven't been able to do it. I remember a week ago we talked about the fact that Pittsburgh was going to be in real trouble because the Patriots were going to beat them and then the Saints were going to beat them. Well, Pittsburgh snuck out a win against the Patriots. Then you have the Ravens, and we think, oh, well, the Chargers, that'll help out Pittsburgh because the Chargers should be able to knock off the Ravens. And you would think the Chargers would be motivated because the Chiefs have been struggling lately. They could take care of the AFC West, really jump ahead of the Chiefs for the first time all season, and they can't do it. But